Do you want to catch more fish than your friends? What if I told you I'm about to give you all the secrets I've learned over 10 years of fishing a swim bait to instantly start catching more bass? In today's video, I'm going to do just that by taking you through the gear you need and some sneaky tricks with your setup. Then we're gonna head out on the water and show you exactly where to fish this bait to catch even more fish. And finally, we're gonna show you how to retrieve it with the most important tip that could drastically increase the number of fish you catch. So stay tuned and let's get into it. So the finesse swim bait is one of my favorite lures of all time. It catches all three species of bass, and I firmly believe this is probably one of the easiest techniques to learn how to fish. I'm also sure you probably already have the gear to throw this thing. Ultimately, this thing just mimics exactly what those fish want to eat. They feed on little bait fish and minnows that swim around down there on the bottom, and this is the most natural way to present that item to those fish, and it looks realistic and gets a lot of bites. Now for your gear, we're gonna cover this pretty thoroughly today, so no matter your experience level, you can get something out of this video. If you are just starting out fishing, this is the rod combo I would recommend right here. This is the Cash and Core spinning rod. It's a 7-foot, medium power, fast action, and I have a Shimano Sedona 2500 on here with 10-pound or 15-pound lime green Suffix 832 braid, and I tie an FG knot to a fluorocarbon leader of 8-pound test here. We'll talk about the bait in just a second. I want to cover this other rod right here. I actually prefer to fish mine on a bait caster now because of one reason. I can throw straight fluorocarbon and I can throw straight 12-pound fluorocarbon. So I get a little bit heavier line so I don't break off as much and I can handle some bigger fish. I fish this on Lake Erie a lot. So hooking up on 5-pound smallmouth on 8-pound test is a little more risky than hooking up on 5-pound smallmouth with 12-pound test. And most importantly, the reason why I like the fluorocarbon the best is that fluorocarbon sinks. So if I have an entire reel of straight fluorocarbon, that is going to sink and get a direct connection to my bait, which will allow me to keep my bait on the bottom longer, which will equal more bites. The bait caster specs real fast. This is the Cashin Icon topwater and jerkbait rod. This is the 6'9" extra fast action medium power. I could do the same thing with a fast action. That really doesn't make a difference, but again, medium power. So both of these are medium power rods. It gives you just enough soft tip to let that fish get the bait into its mouth, but it has enough backbone to stick them, and these hooks are very light wire, so you don't need to like jaw jack them on a hook set when they bite. For the most part, I'm gonna wind, and when I get a bite, I'm just gonna lean into that fish and let it load up, and that little light wire hook will needle point and penetrate right through their mouth, and you'll catch them just fine. Now when it comes down to the bait, there's really only one bait that I like to throw, but there are plenty on the market, so I'm gonna mention them all in case you don't wanna fish this one here. This is the 6th Sense Divine swim bait. Specifically the 3.2 size. I do not throw any of the other sizes for this technique. You could throw the 3.8, you could throw the 2.7, but I prefer the 3.2. It seems to be the perfect size for this technique. And the biggest key for whatever swim bait you're gonna select is making sure it's soft enough that it paddles at slow speed. So what I've actually found with the 3.8, it works excellent as a swim jig trailer and other stuff like that where you're working a little bit faster. This thing I'm gonna crawl on the bottom. It's thicker in plastic because it's a bigger bait, so the paddle tail doesn't swim as well. So this one swims a lot better because it's much thinner, it's a much softer plastic material, and it has a nice wobble down there on the bottom. So the 3.2 is like the magic size for me. And while these baits are great, there are plenty others on the market that you can use, like the Kitex. They're excellent. I used to fish those for many years. There's the Rage Swimmer and many other finesse swim baits out there. Just look for the softest swim bait you can get in that 3 to 4 inch range, because that's usually about the size of bait these fish are gonna be feeding on. If you want to get any of the 6th Sense gear we're gonna talk about today, the best way you can help out the channel is by using my code Quince on the website. It helps me out a ton to continue making videos like this, so if you can use that code and check out some of their baits, helps me out greatly. The last thing that you need for your swim bait here is going to be a jig head. Before this weekend when I went fishing, I would have told you there's only one size you need, and that would be the 1/4 ounce size. That's the size I always fished. I never did anything else. Well, I started fishing the 1/4 ounce size this weekend when I was fishing a river that had no current because we haven't had a lot of rain recently, and I was getting no bites and I kept getting snagged all the time. And I had a 3/16 on here for my spinning rod, and I figured I'd fish it a little bit and see if they would bite it. And I caught 3 in a row off the same spot that I was just throwing the 5/16 ounce weight. It was not swimming as naturally through the water because of the current. So now I carry a variety of swim bait head sizes with me. Realistically, the only ones you need are probably like a 3/16, a quarter, 5/16, and then a 3/8. But again, if I'm going to recommend one size, it would be the 1/4 ounce. It will work most of the time. And most importantly with your jig head is a 90-degree line tie to keep this thing on the bottom, but coming over cover as opposed to into cover, and a small hook. A lightweight paired with a small hook, like a 1 or a 2/0 hook here, you're going to go way down on your snags than if you had a little bit heavier weight for the current and like a 3 or a 4/0 hook. You're gonna get hung in everything if you do that, and it's going to kill the action of your bait. And the last tip comes around color before we head out on the water and show you where to fish this. These fish are going to get such a good look at this bait that you do not want anything unnatural at all. So dyeing your tails chartreuse, even using these bright white colors without the chartreuse tail, if this was just straight white, sometimes can be overkill because those fish will track this bait. I've watched them do it on live scope now that I have it. They will literally turn around and track this bait down the current and decide if they want to eat it or not. So if they have something that looks like this and it's bright, flashy chartreuse color swimming through the water, a bait fish doesn't look like that most of the time. Granted, if you have dirty water and those fish need to see the bait, smallmouth or sight feeders, if they need to see the bait, you might have to do something like this just to get them to see it, and then the action might trick them into biting it. But overall, when I'm fishing this bait, I'm using natural colors. So this one's called Pro Shad. This one here that I have rigged up is called Electric Shiner. I've used Pro Blue for years, Clearwater Rose, any of those colors that look very natural, subtle color. Now that you have the whole rig ready to go, let's get out on the water. We're gonna show you exactly where to fish it and how to fish it to catch a lot of fish. Now that we know what gear we need and have the bait rigged up, you obviously need to know where to fish this to catch the most amount of fish. And I brought my buddy John here. You've seen him on the channel multiple times, but he's gonna help me out today, not only filming here, showing you how to find these fish, but then he's gonna jump up on the front deck with me. We're gonna catch us a couple bass. So John's gonna grab the camera real fast. We're gonna show you how to do it with all electronics. So everything from 360, live scope, and even just to do this with 2D, no sonar at all. Every different way you can find fish with this bait. All right, so now we're up here on the front deck and we're gonna find us some fish. Obviously I've fished this place a lot, so I'm gonna show you what you need to be looking for, and then go out on your body of water, side scan around, find some of these spots and catch you some fish. Right here on my 360, this is my #1 tool to find fish, especially when I'm up here on the trolling motor. I'm looking for these rock piles like these right here, and the way you can tell they're rock piles, it throws this shadow on the back end here. So you can see right there, that shadow, the sonar cone's coming out hitting this and throwing a shadow on the back end, so they can get in behind this rock pile and hang out there away from the current and come up and ambush bait. Obviously there's not too much current today, but as the stronger the current gets, the more predictable these fish are going to be and get in behind here. Same with my live scope. You can see some of these rock piles are showing up right here, and you can see they're not tall, they're just little mounds, but those little mounds is enough just to get those fish in behind that rock pile and protect themselves from that current. The last way we're going to do it is with 2D. So obviously some people don't have forward-facing sonar or 360, so the easiest way to do that, whether you're on your big motor back there or we're going to do it with the trolling motor, you can watch your bottom. So we're in 14 foot right here on 2D, and you can see I'm going to troll forward to one of these rock piles, and as I get closer to it, you're going to see the bottom go from 14 foot, and you can see right here it's jumping up to 13 foot, 12 and a half. It's getting pretty shallow. I'm not gonna go all the way over the top of it because we do want to turn around and fish this again, but that's 12 and a half foot right there. You could drop your waypoint, it would show up on your graph, and then you could turn around and line up back downstream of that again and cast up to it, and you don't even need fancy sonar to do it. I used to do it this way for years. I'd troll around until I saw a big hump in the bottom, I'd mark it with a waypoint, and then I'd turn around and cast to it, and those fish will tuck in behind it, and that's how you catch them. So let's get John back up here with a fishing rod in his hand, and let's catch us some fish. Lastly, let's show you how to fish this bait now that we know where to fish it and what we need to fish this bait. We are going to be starting with the spinning rod, and then we'll move to the bait caster and show you how to fish both, just in case you have either setup. I prefer the bait caster usually, but today we have no current on this river, and they seem to like the lighter weights, as we talked about in the gear section. So the 3/16 has been outperforming the 5/16 on the bait caster. and the slower gear ratio has been helping keep it on the bottom with this slow current. So that's why we're going to be using the spinning rod to catch most of our fish, but we will show you how to retrieve the bait caster too. And then now what we're going to do is line up on our cast. So we found our rock pile that we had talked about. So we're going to place that rock pile halfway between me and the end of my cast, so that when I make a long cast, my bait's going to land on the other side of the rock pile. The current will slowly arc your bait down and towards the rock pile as it's sinking. And then when you start your retrieve, your bait is in the cover for as long as possible. If you throw it right to the edge of the rock pile, by the time your bait actually sinks down in the current, it is already beyond the rock pile and out of the strike zone. So we're going to take our spinning rod and make a nice long cast. And since we're fishing in a river, I want to stay downstream and fish it down the current. So whether you fish directly in line with the current or up to about a 45-degree angle, the stronger the current, the straighter you need to cast to keep direct connection with your bait. But on a day like today where there's minimal current, my bait will still sweep naturally on that 45-degree cast. I'll watch my braid sink all the way down to the bottom, and when it lays slack, I know my bait is down there. And then all I'm gonna do is start a slow wind with my spinning reel, just like this, making sure to feel my bait tick along the bottom and hit all the rocks while it's down there. So I'm just slowly retrieving this thing back, bouncing it on the bottom, and I can see my rod tip hitting these rocks from time to time and bouncing off of the cover. And eventually it will fall into a little crevice where those fish are sitting, and they'll go ahead and ambush that bait just like they would any other bait fish in the river. And really it is as simple as that. You just go ahead and wind this bait back in and making sure to keep it on the bottom. Now there's a couple tricks to make sure you're catching more fish than other people, because if you do just throw this thing out and wind it back in, eventually your bait will leave the bottom and come way up in the water column, and the fish will not leave the bottom and come up and get that bait. So what we like to do, throw our swim bait out there and let that sink all the way down to the bottom like we just did. Again, watch your line. That lime green braid will tell you when it's on the bottom. You'll see it go out, and then as soon as it stops, you know you've touched the bottom. And I'll start my retrieve, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wind, make sure I'm feeling the bottom. I'm still feeling the bottom, so I'm good. Now I'm not feeling the bottom as much. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna watch my braid, and it went out just a little bit. It only took like 1 or 2 feet of line, but my bait was probably about 2 foot off of the bottom and away from the fish's heads where they would actually want to bite this bait. So you want to keep it in the strike zone, and what I do is bottom check myself like that from time to time to make sure my bait is still down there. Especially when you're fishing the faster gear ratio on the bait caster, you will actually leave the bottom a lot more than you think, and it will cause you to get less bites. The more your bait stays on the bottom, the more bites you're gonna get. You will lose some swim bait heads, but that's gonna equal more fish at the end of the day. So now we're gonna take a cast at the bait caster and show you how to retrieve that and then get to catching some fish. There's not much different with the bait caster other than the fluorocarbon's a little bit harder to watch. So we're gonna take our same long cast we've been taking. We're gonna get that bait out there where we think the fish are and let this thing sink down to the bottom. And then when it hits the bottom, again, watch your fluorocarbon. It's a little bit harder to see than that lime green braid, but you can still see when that slack loop comes back towards the boat and you know you're on the bottom. And then the biggest thing is with the 7 gear ratio, as opposed to the 5 on the spinning rod, you have to reel so slow and force yourself to fish this way to get the most amount of bites. If not, your bait will be leaving the bottom too much and you're gonna get less bites. And you just make sure you're bottom checking yourself throughout the cast too, just like you would with the spinning rod, and it will equate to some fish. See if we can catch us a couple here, or we catch the bottom. The problem is the current is a little bit too slow today for this 5/16 ounce head. So actually reeling it as slow as I need to get the bites and keep it in the strike zone, I'm burying my bait into the cover and it's not flowing over the cover naturally. So we're gonna go back to the spinning rod. And this is a thing that you just gotta play around with. You can see how I'm getting that algae on my bait there? It's because it's burrowing down in the rocks too much and not floating over the top and looking natural. So that's one thing you do have to pay attention to in a river as opposed to a lake. In a lake, just pick the jig head size that maintains bottom contact. But in a river, it's very important to make sure your bait is floating over the cover naturally. So let's go back to the spinning rod. There's one. As soon as I sped it up just a touch, it literally came up off the bottom and he just smoked it. Gave him a little change of pace and she went right for it. We're gonna see if we can get us one more, hopefully a little bit bigger than this, but that is a nice one on the swim bait. Nothing easier than that. Probably one of the easiest techniques to fish, especially for smallmouth. So let's get rigged up and catch us another. There we go.
They are. Feels like a good one.
Like a good one. Giving you the staying down technique.
Yes, it is. This might be a big fish. Oh yeah.
Oh, it is.
That's a tubby. That's a tubby. Oh yeah. That's what the swim bait can do right there. So next time you go fishing, give these tips a shot. Try some fishing with the swim bait. You'll catch a ton of smallmouth just like this one here. And if you want to see another video that you can outfish your friends with, check this one out right here and hit the subscribe button down below. We'll see you on the next one.